This is 152, and we're down to chapter 6 and 7, and I'll start talking about these ATT projects. And I might do the Splunk 4, we'll talk about that. Anyway, so the scope of the incident. This is the first thing. When you discover something bad has happened, like there's malware in the systems, the first question is, how big is the problem? Because you want to contain the problem. You want to stop it from spreading. So you gather some initial data, get some evidence, and determine what you're going to do about it. So you want to, the original alert is somebody did something that caused you to realize you had a security incident, like reporting malware on a system or something not working. So you may notice more about the original alert by looking at it than the original person did. Look at what other systems to look at. Remember, your network administrators probably don't think like investigators, so they might not have, you might want to have fresh eyes take a look at it. And you determine what preliminary evidence might help you. You want to have something you can do quickly to decide how big the problem is. You know, somebody says they can't get their email. It might just be their one system is broken. It might be the server itself is broken. It might be the whole network is down. And you've got to quickly determine how big the problem is. So find something you can get to quickly, collect and review the evidence. And so if you have malware, and then you look for something malware does on the system, like registry keys or the prefetch folder, that sort of thing, browser history or firewall logs. These are things you can quickly make a script to run on the machines to see if they have these objects and quickly determine how many machines are infected. You want independent sources, so like firewall logs and registry keys, which are different. That's more reliable, and it's therefore more difficult for the attacker to remove or hide the evidence from multiple sources. All right. And so the attacker may be causing more damage. They may still be in the network. And so you're trying to find some way to do it, so somebody to quickly turn the answer. So have some kind of like a script to detect it, test it on a clean system and a dirty system, make sure it works, it doesn't overly burden the system, and it doesn't falsely flag clean systems. So you're determining, when you're choosing what to do, do you have something that will answer your questions quickly, and make sure that you're not putting too much effort into a single theory. The most common mistake of investigators of all kinds is they leap to a conclusion, and then they just try to find evidence to support that conclusion and ignore the other evidence. This is a capital mistake. So make sure you're looking at independent sources of evidence. Make sure you're considering how much effort it's taking. You're not choosing to do something that is really slow and burdensome when you don't have time for that. And also consider, you might have uncovered something that's really bad that must be immediately fixed. Something is being destroyed right now, important data is being stolen right now. There was a case Mandiant did where the bad guys had installed malware that was stealing credit card numbers, and they wanted time to analyze the incident, so they installed a system in the middle that corrupted the numbers. So they would continue to get numbers, but the numbers wouldn't work anymore. So they were prevented the theft without alerting the bad guy. That's the kind of thing you might do. So here's a couple scenarios from real cases, of course. So the large on-time retailer. All right, these I think are possibly fake cases. They're probably slight obfuscated cases from Mandiant. But anyway, so customers sign up for your company, now they're getting spam. And it's not because you sold their data for spam the way almost everybody does, apparently, including, by the way, Avast. Avast just got prosecuted by FTC. Their antivirus solution, they claim to protect your privacy, and in fact, they secretly collect your data and sell it to spammers, and they got caught doing that. That's pretty rude. Anyway, so your customers are complaining, saying they're getting spam. Well, you know, by itself, that doesn't prove much of anything. They're probably getting spam anyway, but now you can figure out what to do. You could talk to the customers, get copies of the email, but if you wanted to do that, there might be privacy concerns. But what's more productive is a barium meal, is what they call it in the field. You make, this by the way is also called honey tokens, which are extremely valuable, canary tokens. You create fake customer accounts and then see if they get spam. This is a very useful thing, and all of you should be using Think Canaries. I think I mentioned them before. But instant response, I just get it here. These things, THINGST Canaries, you should be using these things. They're free. These are email addresses, URLs, and so on that you just mix in your data, and you don't use them. But when a bad guy steals your data, they will use them, and then you know your data has been stolen. It's free. It's extremely simple. It's very effective. Most companies get hacked, and they never know they've been hacked because they don't prepare like this. This way, you would know. if somebody sends email to that address, you know they stole it from your database because it was a fake address you put there. Nobody else has it. It's a very good idea. Anyway, all right, so they made fake accounts with long random usernames. Therefore, those are going to be unique accounts that no one else is going to use. Okay, now you're assuming the customer data is somehow being stolen by bad guys. So you find out where it is. There's an internal database and there's an external database at a marketing firm where your copies of your customers' email addresses are. So when you interview people to find out what's going on here, the database system is a mainstream commercial product with the nice advanced monitoring and reporting capabilities. It's huge, almost a terabyte. The traffic is 3 terabytes a day. Customer records can be updated by the website or manually by phone call into customer service. You're trying to figure out where the data gets stolen. This is the kind of background information that will guide your planning. So there's no other way to update customer records except those 2 ways, but there are backups. And the marketing firm receives data at the end of every month. So those are places where your data goes. By the way, I mentioned before, whenever you're going to secure something, the first step is an inventory. What is the important stuff and where is it? And most companies can't even tell you where it is or how many copies there are. There's a main copy, then there's a copy on my home system, then we put it on thumb drives, then somebody emailed it, then somebody put it in the Google Drive, and we really don't know how many other copies they made. First, you got to overcome that. You got to actually know how many copies there are and where they are. Then you can make progress. These people have gotten that far. They have a limited number of places the data is, and they know where it is. So that's good. That's a step up in security maturity. So you make a plan. Now, the marketing firm could be the source of the data loss, but since you only send it to them every month, you find customers that are getting spam before their data goes in. So that makes it unlikely that that's the course. Now, you could monitor phone calls and listen to people reading their address on the phone, but that's expensive and difficult. You get them one by one. That is not how it's usually done. It's too much bother. It's far more effective to steal the whole database from a server somehow. But like malware, that's not listening to voice traffic is not commonly worth the bother for the attacker. Now, you might try capturing the network traffic to the database, but it's 3 terabytes per day. And that's going to be horrible to dig through. Besides, it's probably encrypted these days. So that's not far more productive is to just have a log of the queries on the database server, which it's capable of doing. Then you'll get the information you want, what addresses have been updated. So you got theories. You might say an insider is stealing data and selling it. That's certainly possible, but it's not obvious how you can test for that. So that's a thing to be aware of. It might have put keyloggers or something on the website to steal email addresses. So to test that, you put in some fake accounts directly on there to wait to see if they're going to get mail. Somebody might be copying the backup tapes, so you put some different fake accounts in the backups. These are the barium meals. You put these markers in the data, and then you got 3 sets of accounts made through the web form, entered directly in the database, and added to the backups. And now you just wait for them to get spam. And what happens is the first set of fake accounts and the accounts manually entered in the database both get spam. So the data, regardless of where it came from, when the data gets in the database, those people get spam. But the data put into the backup tape does not get spam. So they're not stealing your backups. So now you have more information where to look. Somehow they're getting the data in your database. So there could be malware on the database server. That's one option. Or they could be executing queries over the network to get the data. So you could monitor it with network level packet captures, but we talked about that. That's very impractical. It's a ton of data, hard to analyze, especially since everything is encrypted. What's far better is just turn on logging on your database server. It logs what queries came in and what IP address thing, what time they came in, which is the standard stuff. And then you have a reasonable file where you can look through. So create some more fake accounts, talk to the administrators to see where they're stored, look to see what normal queries are. And you see under normal circumstances, there are no queries to perform a bulk export of email addresses on a daily basis. So 2 weeks later, your new accounts get spam. So now you can retrieve query logs and you can find out that there was a query, a single query that selected all the emails, all the new emails beyond a certain date and sent them somewhere. So somehow this appears to be done with queries over the database, over the network. And this is quite common For example, the Chinese attacker, Volt Typhoon, that we have all been warned about like crazy over the last week. There's a huge alert from the Department of Homeland Security and CISA and the UK GS. Everybody said they're hacking our infrastructure. And they said their techniques are typically that they don't use malware, they use valid credentials they just steal. Now, you can buy valid credentials. You can also just phish them. You can come in by brute force attacks, or the other one they call, I forget the name of it, where you just try the opposite of brute force attack. You take one password and try it on many accounts. Spraying, password spraying. That's the other one. Both of those, just if somebody used a common password, you'll get in that way. And once you're in, you then find a way to escalate privileges on that machine, which is pretty easy, and then you steal the stored hashed credentials on that machine, use those to traverse through the network. And they don't use malware, you use living off the land tools, built-in tools. So that's what's going on here. They apparently found a way to control a machine which has the authorization to perform queries, and they're performing queries over your network, presumably using the credentials of your company. That's why you might think it's an insider, but it probably isn't. This is Volt Typhoon gets your credentials to get in your VPN to log into your network, and then they use these authenticated accounts to get in. That's the best way to do it, of course.
How big are your password?
Well, there are a lot of ways. This particular group, I think they mainly get it by just using online dumps of passwords and then finding somebody that reused a password. Another technique, there were a previous group about 2 years ago where they would just buy them. You can just go on criminal forums and people just sell them. They get passwords, and they presumably get them by guessing them or by using phishing. But for a while, I don't know if this is still true, but about 10 years ago, there were a lot of forums where they would say, I have 10 computers inside IBM, Microsoft, GM, and you can use them for an hour to verify it's true, and then for like $100 a day, you can do whatever you want with them. They had already implanted malware on these machines, had them under remote control, and were willing to prove this before you paid. And they were just out there to buy for a reasonable price. I don't know if that's still true. At that time, they said something like 11% of internal corporate machines were infected. It might be better now. I hope so. But anyway, so here's the query details. You know when they came in, you know what IP they came in from. So somebody in the graphics art department is doing a query that dumps out a whole week's worth of emails. So you interview the graphics art department. They have no interaction with customers, only outside vendors. It used the database administrator's username from the IT department. So there's evidence to support complaints of people receiving spam. It does look like somebody is stealing the email. There's a 2-week cycle of data theft being extracted directly from the production database over the network from the computer and graphic arts. All right, and using a database administrator in the IT department. So now you got to do some action. First, go to the machine it came from and collect a live response and forensic image. You have a complete image of that machine. So you can now check and see what's going on. Interview the user and determine if it's been acting strange, who's been using it, whether it's left on, unattended, things like that. Then go to database server, get a live response, which is what you're going to do with Velociraptor, which is just a query over the network that tells you a summary, running processes, files, things like that. Not an image of the whole drive or an image of the whole data of the whole RAM, just a list of normal things like file names, registry keys, running processes, open network connections, a reasonable list that's just text, and then preserve all the database logs, preserve all query logs and application and system logs. Get all the logs, which is quite reasonable. So now in the workstation, you can examine these images with a forensic tool like Autopsy or FTK or Encase, and you find malware on the workstation. So now you're getting this, by the way, is the first time you could really, I think, begin to exclude insiders. Now you really do find there's remote shell malware in there. Somebody is controlling that workstation, connecting to a foreign IP, and it's been there for 2 years. And this is what the Volt Typhoon was about. They said not only is the Chinese hacking our critical infrastructure like power plants and water plants, but they have been in there for 5 years. And so they've been able to turn that stuff off anytime they want for the last 5 years, and they haven't done it yet. This is what advanced persistent threat attackers typically do. They don't just come in and break things. They sneak in and establish a persistent foothold and then just quietly wait and maybe exfiltrate a little bit of data to monitor what you're doing, but they don't do any harm because then they get caught. They're waiting for the time when it has decided it's time to attack you. Like, for example, then China invades Taiwan, and the U.S. government is going to punish them, and now they freeze up our computer systems to like slow down the response. That's what you do. So you prepare for it in advance by having the ability to turn off this stuff when you need to. So they were not able to determine how the system was originally compromised. Nobody has logs going back 5 years. So this is extremely common, unfortunately. Most companies that get hacked never figure it out at all. The average time is 270 days, at least it was a few years ago, and most of them only find out when the FBI comes and tells them, we found your stolen data on somebody's server. They don't have the ability to detect this stuff at all. The ones that are more mature do have an incident response team, a network monitoring team, and they have a chance to detect this stuff themselves, which is, of course, much better. But a lot of people, like here, you discover you've been known for years. This is how I got in trouble with the University of Louisiana. I told them that someone stole their medical data years ago, and they blamed me for stealing it as a hacker. But anyway, their data was stolen. I found the stolen copies of their data sitting around, and it had been stolen 2 years earlier, but they didn't like to admit that. Anyway, so now use a host-based inspection tool to look around for compromise. Now you've seen the malware, you know what it does, so you look for the traces of that malware and find out where it goes. Look for the firewall logs. Now you know the IP address it goes to, so you can see if other machines are sending connections to that IP address. All right, and now you're making progress. Now you found the problem, you have an idea where it's coming from. This is a successful investigation. And here's some examples of ways it could go wrong. Let me just check for comments here. All right, good. Nothing new there. All right, so here's things that might have gone wrong. After you get complaints from the customers, you might say, well, somebody's making unauthorized copies of the emails, so we'll hunt through all the computers in the company to see where the email has extra copies. And that's, of course, a lot of work, and it's assuming that the stolen data is going by being copied on your company servers. And that wasn't true. So I say the number one flaw you'll make is making some kind of assumption and then going in that direction without considering all the options. That's why one frustrating thing about capture the flag contests, which I highly recommend, is there are always questions that seem impossible because you have to think outside the box. And the way the question is phrased starts you on a path, but you have to go down a different path. This is a real world situation. You feel cheated when you do this. I was struggling, like to break this password. They have some crash that can't be cracked, but there's another way in. And so there is no evidence that data was on the company servers or just all being stolen in a large file. So this is a foolish avenue of investigation, a lot of effort and a small chance of success. Here's another one. Decide it must be an insider stealing the data. So now you start a witch hunt, you investigate your people, review personnel files, turn on video surveillance and all this to find the traitor inside your network. This is what's been happening for the last several years at the NSA because they really had Snowden. He was really an insider. He really leaked the stuff. So now they're terrified and paranoid. They really are constantly hunting to see which one of you guys are going to betray us. This is bad for morale. But, they have a reason. But in this case, you didn't have any good reason to believe it was an insider. So this is another way to harm the company and not solve the problem. You could decide that there must be something on the database server, hunt for malware. But then you're going to try to image the RAM and the hard drive for a database server, which is huge. So this will take forever. That's why they never got anything from it but the logs, because all the rest of these things are huge. And you could spend months wading through all that garbage. And you're not going to find any malware on it anyway. That's not how it's happening. It's a legitimate query being instituted from an authorized user in your company. So again, you jump to a conclusion, and you're going down the wrong alley, ramming your head against the wall. This is very easy to do. It happens to me a lot in capture the flag contests. I start off in the wrong direction, and it gets something really hard, and then I put a lot of effort into doing this really hard thing, and it's never going to work because I'm just going in the wrong direction. All right. Then there's automated clearinghouse. This is people that transfer money. They had to transfer $183,000, and the bank called them and stopped them, which is nice when you have a good bank. I remember about 5 years ago, I went to the bank, and they had a big sign up by the teller that said, "Are you here to get a cashier's check to send it to Nigeria? Please don't." It's your money. You can do what you want, but talk to us. Even though they told you not to talk to anyone, talk to us before you do that. And that's the thing. A good bank can help you. They say, "Do you really want to send this money to some strange place?" And they don't. So that was flagged by their fraud prevention system. And the woman that runs this is on Twitter, Selena Kyle. Her real name may come back to me. She's now the head of ISC Squared, which was for a while. And then she ran the fraud detection system at banks, and she was a mathematician by training, and she learned game theory, like the prisoner's dilemma. She figured out how to detect out of all these transactions which ones are abnormal and likely to be fraudulent, and she's very good at it. All right, so it came from his account, but he didn't authorize it. So here's the facts. It was initiated using the CFO's online bank account. You know the time, you know the source IP. It was inside your company. It came from inside your company. So you look at the firewall, look at some logs. Then you want to examine the computer. Well, you could do a live response and get the image from there, but maybe other computers are involved. But this is a start. You know there was a network connection, and you know what computer it came from. So those are places to go to look for clues. Looking at firewall logs, you can see 2 computers logged in around that time from 2 IPs. One is the CFO's IP, and the other is an unfamiliar IP. So investigating that, the complete forensic evidence from the CFO's computer. You always want to gather it quickly, of course, because the more you use this machine, the more evidence is being overwritten. So you track down the other IP address and find out what's going on. You look at your DHCP logs, because IP addresses are reused, and only with DHCP logs do you know what MAC address was actually connected using that IP address. So you find out that both of these connections came from the CFO's laptop, one from the wired card and one from the wireless card. So there's only one computer involved. So now you interview him and say, what's going on here? Well, he was at work, but he left at 4:30. He had a meeting, so he took his laptop, disconnected it from the wired network, carried it into the conference room, and connected through the wireless network. That's why his laptop had 2 different IPs. And he said he didn't do it and doesn't know anything about it, but that's why his machine had 2 connections at that time. So firewall logs show 2 connections. He claims that he didn't do it. You have firewall logs, you have live response data, an image from the computer. So here's some theories. Maybe somebody walked into his office and used his computer when he was not there. You could check for security cameras if there are people sitting nearby. Maybe there's malware on there. So somebody else is remotely able to initiate actions from that computer. You should be able to pick that up in your forensic data, although you have to be aware that you can't always detect it. Not all attacks use malware. Like I say, modern attackers often don't use malware at all. They just use legitimate system administration utilities from Microsoft, like PS exec. So there still will be traces left, but it's not as easy as just scanning it for malware. So you check, and the way the company is set up, it's unlikely that somebody could walk into his office without being observed. So that's not likely. Check the computer, and you find there is a recently installed persistent executable. There's something installed recently which is automatically relaunching every time he reboots, a persistence mechanism. So that is the sign of, if that's not some legitimate commercial product that serves a purpose, it's probably malware, and they send it up to some place like VirusTotal, and it is Zeus banking malware. So it is got remote control software on that machine, and that's real progress now. So now you're down to your final steps. Now all you have to do is try to determine when and how it was infected, go inspect the other machines and see if they're infected too, look at your firewall logs, the usual stuff. But now you've got a nice firm grasp on it. Now you can proceed in an orderly way to clean things up. All right, so here's things that could go wrong. One thing people used to believe, I don't know if anybody believes this anymore, I bet they do, there was a time when most people believed antivirus is perfect. So if no antivirus alert, there's no malware. Now, it was never that good, and it's really not that good anymore. But if you believed that, then you'd say, well, the bank must be lying to us. The bank must have some evil person in the bank doing it, and blame them and yell at them and demand that they find the attacker when there's nobody there. But, if your antivirus was really that good, then this would be reasonable, but it's not. Stuff gets through your antivirus, stuff gets through your detection system. That's the whole reason for this class. That's why we're here. There was a time when they believed in prevention. Now we have all had to admit our prevention solutions are not perfect. There is some bad stuff that gets through, and you have to have instant response for the stuff that got through your prevention. Prevention is good. You shouldn't quit using antivirus, but you should understand you can't trust it too far. So here they didn't validate the bank's data. They assumed their network security measures would detect the problem. And now you assume that a third-party company is going to solve the problem, there's a lot of problems with that. I mean, why should they bother? What do they care? They aren't really going to do a good investigation. You don't have any control over them. Blaming a third party is just a way for one person to avoid work, but it's very unlikely to lead to a solution. Right, another unwise path. Say you must have initiated the transfer, the CFO is a crook, so you investigate the CFO and prove that they're really stealing a company, the money. And I thought this is good. There's a couple of reasons not to do this. The first one, obviously, is you have jumped to a risky, dangerous conclusion, which clearly has a downside, without investigating other areas. But another one, which I was real glad to see, is you are a network security administrator. You're not a private investigator to investigate people. That's a whole different skill. So even from like the ISC squared code of ethics, one of the rules is you must refuse to do things you are not competent to do. If they need something, if they ask you to do something like crack this encryption and you don't know how to do it, you don't pretend to do it or do a rotten job. You say, I don't know how to do that. Let me recommend my friend here who can do that, or something like that. But it is unethical to do something you are not competent to do. Pretend to do it and do it wrong. Instead, you say, nope, that's not my thing. You'll have to get somebody else to do it. And you could help them by knowing somebody in the community that does that. I've done that, refer them to people who are experts. I remember when PBS got hacked. They hacked Bert and Ernie about 15 years ago and put malware on their system. And it was TV, and I said, they don't have any money. They probably don't have any security. This is bullshit. And so I put them in contact with some of my friends. I said, would you like to help out? Sure, you went and helped them out for free. You could put in professional instant response. I said, of course they got hacked. They probably have no security, but this is garbage. and he helped them, So all right, so let's take a look at some cahoots. Whoa. Offline. Well, I hope you people are seeing it. I'm not seeing the stream. Okay, hopefully it's just me. Anyway, all right. I think there would be complaints and stuff if they weren't seeing it. Anyway, let's try the cahoots. 152, chapter 6, I think. All right. There we are. They had a SQL injection at PBS. That's how they got in. I remember that. And then they did something like dump a database or something. They did something to prove they really got in. And they didn't know what to do. And I said, well, I know some friends that will probably help. I called Jeremiah White. Jeremiah, forget his last name. He ran security. He fixed that. Jeremiah Grossman. I think it was White Hat Security. He was a company. He had a company at the time that did stuff, and I contacted him, and he said, oh, sure. And everybody loves PBS, and of course you don't expect them to have good network security, especially at that time. It was like 2010, when very few people did. And they don't have any money. Oh, good. I guess people have seen it, or they wouldn't know to come here. Okay, good. The Twitch viewer does seem to crash now. I have to refresh the page. It acts like Flash. It can't be Flash anymore, but it's probably HTML5 stuff. But whatever it is, it's not terribly reliable. Anyway, let's give it a shot. It can't be Flash. All right, so Coke hires you to perform IR, and they're sure Pepsi did it. So now what? You got to consider other alternate theories. You're not even ready for sources of evidence yet. You need other theories of what happened. And this, of course, is, all right, that's not a bad answer, but this is the best answer. By the way, this is extremely common that a top executive has some wrong idea and they're forceful and angry about it. This is why human skills are super important. Can you persuade them to consider something they don't want to hear? This is why, technical skills will get you a job, but only people skills will get you promotions. You have to learn how to communicate with humans, which is hard for technical people. But, very often your boss has a wrong idea, and it takes social skills to convince them that they're wrong without making them mad at you. It's just telling them, just being right is not enough. You have to learn how to influence people, which is not taught in these classes. It should be. You had like a psychology course or something. It would really help. Anyway, all right. The classic cliche is the angry IT guy that is screaming and yelling about something, and everybody has no idea what he's talking about. He's always mad about something. Your security guy, we wish we could fire him, and he's the only guy who knows how anything works. But he doesn't make any sense, and he's always screaming and yelling and mad about something that no one can understand. This is really, really common. And you have to fix it by getting like a CISSP, learn to communicate with management, learn how to talk their language. Then you can effectively get what you need and understand. But just being angry and crazy at them doesn't help. I've been that guy. It didn't work. Anyway. All right, so Mint is hacked, and customers are downloading infected files. This really happened about 5 years ago. Mint Linux had a corrupted image that people were downloading. It happened to Ubuntu, too, about 12 years ago. Now you stop it. Right. People are downloading malware right now, so you got to stop that. The web page down for maintenance or something while you figure out what's happening. Okay. Mint, they hacked it and modified the images, and then they were downloading stuff directly from the website. With Ubuntu, it was because their updates cost too much money, so they let local clubs volunteer to run update servers, and some of them ran unencrypted FTP servers with default passwords. So people could just go in and replace the files on some of them. So, that's kind of what happens, Anyway, so that's the problem with letting hobbyists do things. You need to have some kind of enforcement of standards if you're going to do that. So the database server shows suspicious queries, and the administrator wants to image the SAN. So what shall we do? Okay, the problem is the SAN is huge. This is too much data. It's too hard to analyze. You want to do something else. Find some way to log just what you need rather than getting a mountain of data that you have to wade through. All right, your CEO demands that you hack the attacker back. Boy, this happens a lot. Now what you do? I've done this. I was at my legal job, and the CEO ordered me to violate the settlement agreement. And I said, I'm not. We're supposed to have phone lines available for customers up for 30 days. And he said, those phone lines cost too much. Turn them off. And I said, I'm not turning them off. And I talked to the second in command, and he said, well, I'll talk to him and talk him out of it, which is what he did. Because I said, I can get another job. I don't have to do this. I'm not going to jail for you guys. You got to keep that in mind, This is what happens to everybody around Donald Trump. He talks them into doing dangerous stuff, then they get in prison and lose their bar license and everything. You got to watch it. Bosses will demand you do illegal things. Just like in the Army, you can get illegal orders. In both cases, you have to consider, I could leave. I could not do this. And that might be wiser than following you off the cliff. Anyway. Just FL. Honey. Well, let's go a little bit further here. We've got some time. All right. So now we'll go on to live data collection, which is what we've been talking about all along. We should go into more detail. This is what you normally do. This is the most common kind of data collection because it's fast and easy and effective. You get useful data instead of gigabytes of junk you're going to have to wade through. So you want to get stuff, volatile evidence that will not last, so you've got it. So you collect log files, lists of files, registry keys, network connections, that sort of thing. You're trying to get quick answers and minimize changes to the system, and you also don't want to burden the system and cause crashes or disrupt business. So when to perform this? When you believe there's something volatile on there that's valuable, like a running process like malware or network connection, can you run it in a way that won't change the target system too much? This may not be possible for small systems like IoT devices or something, but for normal multi-purpose computers, they certainly can run another process and it won't damage things too much. Consider if you have a large number of systems to investigate, then you really don't want to do something like make forensic copies of them all. You want to do something simple and fast, like a few queries. Is it going to burden the system too much and fail or make it crash? And are there legal considerations? Is some of that data confidential and private, not owned by you, not owned by your company? This is the problem these days, now that everybody works from home. City College could try to make an image of my computer, but they wouldn't have the legal right to. Even if I'm transacting college business on this computer, a bunch of stuff going on there is not college business. So you got a legal problem. Anyway, right, so test the system on a similar system first to make sure it works and nothing is wrong. Consider if the system can handle a little more load. If it crashes, what would happen? Anything you do might crash your system, especially if it might be broken or infected with malware. So be aware of that. And make sure you got approval from whoever's required, depending on what you're doing. If you're imaging somebody's laptop because you think they're doing a bad thing, you make sure they know, make sure their boss knows, that sort of thing. Or make sure their boss is authorized doing it covertly. But, make sure you got approval from the right person in writing. I got approval to scan the network here for malware in one of my summer classes from the network administrator, and then the student brought in this powerful tool and we ran it and brought down everything, the whole college network. And then I said, now that I think about it, I didn't get that approval in writing. That would have been good. But the guy said, no, that's fine. And I wanted to see if they'd noticed. And I said, well, they noticed. Anyway, so we were okay. But anyway, all right, so your live response changes the system, so be aware of that. You are going to find in the live response your forensic tool running as one of the processes, and your forensic tool making network connections and stuff. So that's the thing. It's not perfect, but it is what we do these days. This is why you have the same problem as like a person that analyzes blood splatter. Some of the data you collect is caused by your collection system. So you have to be intelligent enough to know what is the real evidence and what is the artifacts I created while gathering the evidence. That's part of your job. So the live response tool, you can just make your own script in PowerShell or Bash or DOS or something, or Perl or Python if they have Python installed, a script just to collect data. It could do anything you like. I've done this for Mac malware analyses. Velociraptor is the main one we're going to use here. It's just an automated way to run a whole bunch of standard scripts, which turn out to be really fantastic, and I've never needed to write my own. Those standard scripts are good enough to do pretty much everything you need. Right, so consider, is your tool generally accepted? Does it work on all the operating systems you have? If all you got is Windows tools and you're trying to analyze a Linux box, you're out of luck. So be aware of that. By the way, if you use OS commands in your script, bring in known good copies of those commands, because malware will Trojan the commands. So trusting the system commands on the box is not wise. They may be altered. So make sure you're getting data that's important. Make sure it won't take very long, like less than an hour, usually much less. Make sure it's configurable, and make sure that the output is easily reviewed and understood. You don't want some mess you can't dig through. So collect the current running state of the system, network connections and processes, collect logs, file listings, that sort of thing. Some people always want the whole RAM or the whole hard disk, but this is expensive to collect, expensive to store, expensive to analyze. It's not efficient. Technically, all the data is there, but in practice, this is not the way to most effectively find the good stuff that you need to respond to an incident. So get the time and date, including the time zone. A lot of people change time zones and dates, versions of things, general system information, services, and especially things programmed to automatically restart. Those are all something you need to look at, because that's pretty suspicious. And list of tasks scheduled to automatically run, user accounts and group membership. All these are things that are likely to be changed by an attacker. Network interface details, routing tables, network connections, so you can trace network traffic logs you get off a firewall or other network device and tell what system it matches. Loaded drivers, files, running processes, login history, especially because the bad guy often tries to log in and makes many attempts. System logs, software, web browser history and antivirus, and so on. Right, and you're going to do a complete RAM capture. You might want to. There's a bunch of tools to do this. You can do it with FTK Imager, I think. And, right, yeah. So, again, always practice on a test system first to make sure you understand what your tool does. And consider problems like a broken USB port or NIC. So, whenever you collect forensic data, it may include malware. That system may be infected. In fact, that's probably why you're infecting it. So be aware that anything you connect, the data on that might be stolen and sent off to other people. They might become infected. Any credentials you use might be stolen and sent off to the bad guys. So be aware of that. Don't just blithely connect it to an important system and think that this possibly infected system can be trusted with anything. So document what you do. This is super important. This has saved me so many times. I learned to just keep complete notes of what I'm doing. Even if you make a mistake, you write it down and you keep going. You say, well, I did this. That was a mistake. Here's what I did about it. There's no point lying about it. It's going to come out anyway. Nobody's perfect. But just make sure you write down what you did so people can reproduce it. Right. Remember, treat the computer as hot. You don't want to type commands on it. You want to just make a plan and do an efficient capture and then stop using it. You don't want to be modifying the evidence system any more than you have to. So use tools that minimize the impact. Usually ones without GUIs, but command line tools are better. And keep a log and a cryptographic check some of your output so you have a clear a way to prove that has not been modified. So you can go to court and say, this is the output of my tool, and I know that nobody added something to it later. This happened a while ago. There was a thing called Playpen, which had child pornography on the internet, and anonymous members, the anonymous collective of hackers, found out about it before the FBI did anything. So they went in and infected the server and dumped and put malware on it, and then got a list of users. And then they published the list of users and sent it to the FBI, and they added some of their enemies to the list, like the Jester. And the FBI said, you idiots are not helping. You're messing everything up, corrupting the data, tipping off the bad guys. Will you just go and play video games and let the police do their work? Because that's the thing. I mean, once you got evidence, you got to not mess with it, of course, or it becomes useless. Anyway, so I found this article that compared acquisition tools, and I was pretty surprised. Here's popular tools. FTK Imager is really popular, and there's a bunch of others. Turns out FTK Imager is probably the worst one to use, the only one I ever used. But FTK Imager uses a lot more RAM than anything else, and makes a lot more registry keys and DILs and stuff than anything else. It's apparently the one that was really good was Belkasoft. Belkasoft RAM capture is much better. I found anyway. Yeah, here it is. Much better. Like 10 times less memory usage. Many fewer registry keys, many fewer libraries used. This one does a lot less damage to the system. In practice, the damage FTK user was generally acceptable to me, but still, it's a thing to be aware of. I never bothered to check. Turns out it's not really the least destructive tool to use. All right, so automate the collection process. This is a really good idea. So exactly the same thing happens. Collect your data in order of volatility. First the RAM, because that stuff is going to vanish quickly. Then the hard drive, that stuff is less volatile. Make sure you preserve the evidence with a chain of custody and an evidence tag and an MD5 checksum, so you can begin a chain of custody in case you go to court. Now you have quality evidence that can be taken to court. And remember, anything you connect could in principle be stolen to the attacker, so don't bring in tools that have private information on them. So credentials be compromised, so it's a good idea to use a different set of credentials and never use them again. Don't modify it any more than you have to, like copying the response kit to the system or storing the output there. Instead, connect to a network share with the tools and send the data to a network share, or bring them in on a USB stick and put them on a removable hard drive, something like that. Don't use the system to perform analysis. That causes unnecessary changes. All you want to do is gather all the evidence from the system and then lock it up and then work from your copy. Here's Common things people really did. Copy the live response toolkit to the system, save all the collected data back to the same system, several gigabytes in size. This clearly is doing a bunch of unnecessary damage to the system, but people just don't understand what they're doing. They don't understand the consequences. Remotely log in with domain administrator account, then run tools to collect evidence off a compromised system. Well, you just handed that to the bad guys. That's really not a good idea. And this is the old-fashioned technique that was considered the standard until about 15 years ago. Pull out the plug, kill the power, and then image the hard drive. Forget about RAM. RAM is useless anyway. That was the attitude for a long time. But this is, of course, the opposite now. RAM is probably the most important now that you're trying to get a attack in progress. Let me check for comments online, actually. Question to be too subjective. Well, it could be. Never been in a position where I could walk away from a job. Well, that's true, of course. Is Belka compatible with all OS? As far as I know, it's only Windows. Belka, that's the only one I've seen. They're good questions. They might have a Linux version, but I haven't heard of it. All right, so here's a good method, a network share, where you, using throwaway credentials, have two folders, a read-only one containing the programs, and a writable one to get the data. That's a pretty good way to deal with it. Then nobody can corrupt your tools. So you browse to the share, you run the live response directly from the share, and put the output on the other share so that it does minimal alteration to the system. Once it's complete, you archive that stuff. Now, your evidence server should be not connected to the internet. This is called work in isolation. This is the fundamental flaw. Forensic analysis should be done without internet connection, so you don't have to explain that. And your live response software typically has to be running as administrator. It's a good idea to automate the process for consistency, because if you do investigate people in your company and then you try to fire them, they will say, this is unfair. You didn't treat me the same as everybody else. It's best if there's a standard process and you treat everybody the same. Then you can defend yourself from that. So some computers can't connect external media, so you might bring in stuff like bringing your tools on a CD and then have an encrypted tunnel going out to send it out over the network. Those are various options. You might have some goofy operating system, like somebody running some old CPM system or something horrible like that, or some IoT device or something. Then you probably can't do this, so you might actually have to do a manual live response. Go in there and run tools like PS and such to collect what you can. All right. And if you have an unexpected OS, remember, just make sure you record what you did. If it turns out that you did the wrong thing and found the wrong answer and did harm, you have to record it and say, here's what I did. If that was the wrong thing, you can get mad at me, but it's far worse to lie about what you did. You should record what you really did. And remember, you don't have to get everything. I've talked about this in forensic class, the cops will get a cell phone. And one thing they've done is just take a camera and photograph the screen and page through the messages and just keep taking photographs. Now, this is not a perfect procedure. It doesn't get all the data, but it is evidence that came from the phone. It'll count in court. The real evidence is the human. So sometimes all you can do is imperfect processes. So you do that, but you keep a record of what you did. And if somebody said, well, you should have had this tool and done something better, I said, yeah, that might have been nice, but I didn't have that, so here's what I did. And even if I didn't do the perfect thing, I did find something, and that has some meaning. Or perhaps you fouled it all up and lost everything, which, by the way, is pretty common with Linux tools. People that use Linux command line, like DD, you have an IF and an OF. The IF is the input file, and the OF is the output file. And the letters, the descriptions are like /dev/SDB and /dev/SDC. So it is quite common that they get them backwards and take the empty evidence collection drive and put it on top of the evidence drive. This is why the pros don't use those command line tools. They use like a hardware device that says evidence here, collection drive here, and it has like a write protect, so you can't write on this one. That's what, that's the thing. But if you make a horrible mistake like that, write it down and tell them what you did. Nobody is ever perfect, and admitting it is better than lying about it. Anyway, so you want to decrease human error, make your process consistent, and this, is better when you're inspected by higher people saying, what did you do? Why did you do that? If you have some orderly process, you look more professional. All right.
I have one question about
Yeah.
this chapter. So they mention like a lot of resources for Windows, and then they say, oh, there's not a whole lot out there for Linux, but it was written several years ago. Is there stuff out there now for incident response?
Not that much. There's a little bit more for Linux, but you know, Linux people often write their own stuff, right? Their own scripts and things. And all these, I've seen people bring up things like Mandiant Redline and stuff. They never seem to work. They never seem to finish them. They seem to make them and sort of give up. Velociraptor is by far the best tool I've ever found, and it can do Windows and Linux. So, I mean, that's the first really good tool. I've tried a lot of them over the years, and they all reach a sort of a buggy beta version and then get abandoned. So Velociraptor also got acquired by Rapid7, which I was really glad to see. So it's not just an open source project where people will get fed up with it. It's now a commercial product. They haven't, and it's continuing to be updated. So, and Rapid7 is also the owner of Metasploit. So they have a good history of keeping a good free version and developing a good commercial version. So I expect that's why I really decided teaching Velociraptor is the right move. I think Velociraptor is here to stay. And it is the best evidence collecting tool I've ever seen. Much better than the previous ones. And it's under active development by a real company that's going to last. And so I think it'll be the standard for a while. All right, let's see. Good, people are telling people how to get to the PowerPoint. Fair enough. Let's try another Kahoot. I got them here. I got to get to the right place. There we are. So that's 7A, I think. Yeah, okay. Good. Give them a few more seconds. Time to open this window, which I should have done earlier. Aha. Another person has appeared. Okay, all right. Let's give it a shot. All right, so a suspect reinstalled their OS to hide evidence. Now what? Hard drive. This really happened to one of my forensic teachers. They tried to get evidence, and the person said, "Oh, I sold my laptop to my attorney, who reinstalled the operating system." And he said, "That's no problem. I want it anyway." And then they settled. They knew they were screwed because they were not aware that reinstalling the OS doesn't wipe out all the evidence at all. It just overwrites the system files, but a lot of the stuff is still there. So, all right, the hard disk is probably still full of good evidence if that's all they did. There are good forensic tools, like you can use the command line and do disk part and then clean all, select disk and clean all. That'll wipe it off. Or you can get erasure, which will wipe it all. But if you don't use a proper forensic tool that takes hours, it doesn't really clean the drive. All right. So you need to find a few infected machines on a large network. What would you do? This is the most common situation. Your live response. You write a script or you use a script generator like Velociraptor that will do some kind of query that will get just a little bit of information, to see, like the list of files, to see if the bad file is on there, and then you run that on everything. And then you can just quickly scan through it and find the ones that have your indicators of compromise. All right, you find child pornography on a machine. Now what? None of this. Your investigation is over. That stuff is radioactive. It is a crime to see it. It is a crime to possess it. You contact the National Center for Exploited Children, which is the FBI, and you give everything to them, and you wash your hands of it. Whatever you were doing, it's over. You don't want to touch that stuff. You're not qualified to handle it. You don't come near it. You just get that out of your hands to them, and forget whatever you thought you were doing. All right. All right, your investigation is going to court and you need complete evidence. So what should you do? You need the hard drive and the RAM. You need everything. So then you can have the complete evidence, a copy for the prosecution and a copy for the defense, and their examiners can, you get everything you can in that case. All right. All right, a jealous husband wants evidence from his wife's laptop. Now what do you do? This is also a true story. I think they've all been true stories. I've been at this for a while. All right, yes. This is one of my students who was a consultant. He called me and said, this guy thinks his wife is cheating on him, so he told me to put like spyware on the wife's machine and find out what she's been doing and do an examination. He said, do you think I should do that? And I said, hell no. Maybe in Saudi Arabia, but in America, women have rights. You can't go on her machine without her permission. And he said, that's what I thought, but I wasn't sure, so I just quoted him a really high price and he went away. And I said, well, that might not be the perfect response, but at least you didn't do it, thank God. So yeah, that's good, right? Obviously, you need her permission. Okay, anyway. Oops, I'm in trouble. There, no. Good. All right, I'm going to stop this and take a